This is CNN Breaking News.
Welcome. You are in the CNN Newsroom. I'm Ryan Nobles in for Ana Cabrera in New York. In the breaking news this hour, the House Intelligence Committee just released a Democratic rebuttal memo, a bullet-by-bullet retort to what the president has called his vindication in the Russia probe. Reporters had anticipated this for weeks. The memo, written by Adam Schiff and his staff, tries to dismantle the narrative built by the Republican majority that the Obama administration improperly surveilled the Trump campaign. Our Justice correspondent Evan Perez has read through the document, and CNN White House correspondent Boris Sanchez is at the White House. Evan, let's start with you. What does this memo say?
Well, this memo contradicts and tries to rebut the argument that was made by Devin Nunes and the Republicans. They said that the Christopher Steele dossier, the dossier put together by a former British spy and paid for by the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign, they say that played a crucial role in the decision to open a very intrusive surveillance of the Carter Page, who was a former national security advisor to the Trump campaign. And according to this memo that's been released by the Democrats, they say that's not exactly the case. They say that the Steele dossier was cited in a couple of places in the initial application in October of 2016 that was made to the secret court that oversees the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. But they say that the FBI had tons of other information. They say that it goes back to 2013 that the FBI had been looking into Carter Page and his associations with Russians, something that obviously we had known in previous stories. We'd reported that there were these interactions, and the FBI had even talked to him and visited him and said, look, we know that the Russians are trying to target you, perhaps trying to turn you into a spy, just so you know. This was an interaction that happened years before he comes into the picture in the Trump campaign. According to this memo, brand new information in this memo, Carter Page was interviewed by the FBI in March of 2016. It doesn't say what exactly the FBI said to him, what the purpose of that investigation, of that interview was, and anything that Carter Page said. But it's important to note that that is the same month that Donald Trump mentions Carter Page's name as an advisor, or national security advisor, when he meets with the Washington Post. At the time, Donald Trump was getting a lot of criticism for not having anybody of substance on his national security team, so he was trying to rebut that, and he mentioned Carter Page's name as one name that was on his side. It's very interesting in this memo, by the way, Ryan, that they seem to suggest that they believe Carter Page perjured himself, at least when he talked to the the House Intelligence Committee. They say that there is information that the FBI possesses that contradicts some of the things that Carter Page has told Congress. So perhaps we're going to have to talk to Carter Page and see what perhaps this is about. This memo does not say exactly what that is. It's also important to mention here that according to the Democrats, by the time in October of 2016, when the Justice Department and the FBI go to the secret court to get this surveillance warrant, they have additional information. They say that by the time there are 3 more renewals of that surveillance of Carter Page, they say that the FBI had been able to corroborate important pieces of information in the dossier that was put together by Christopher Steele. Another important point here that Devin Nunes said, which was that the court was never advised that the Steele dossier was paid for by Democrats. According to the Democratic memo that was released today, they say that the court was aware, and they cite one particular portion of the memo in which they say that the FBI speculates, again, this is a part of the application that was made to the court. It says the FBI speculates that the identified U.S. person, this is the person who had paid for the dossier, was likely looking for information that could be used to discredit candidate number one's campaign. That's a reference to Donald Trump. Again, the president and the Republicans have said that this is not information that was sufficient to show the court that this was a dossier that was paid for by Democratic donors, by the Hillary Clinton campaign. The Democrats say not so much.
All right, Evan Perez, thank you for unpacking all of that. And to the points that you were making, Evan, let's go to Boris Sanchez now at the White House. And despite what Evan is telling us about what is in this memo, we got a statement from the White House that contradicts a bit of that. Boris, what did the White House have to say?
Oh yeah, Ryan, the White House putting out a statement saying that this is a political document that aims to undercut the president, really reiterating some of the claims that we saw in the Nunes memo, that the Schiff memo attempts to dispel. The idea that that salacious dossier was the basis of the Russia investigation, and that a FISA judge wasn't informed about who funded the dossier, and he should have been. Essentially, this boils down to the idea that is the basis for the Nunes memo, that there is a deep state conspiracy that is out to delegitimize President Trump and his agenda. If we take a step back, we have to accept that President Trump, for the extent of his presidency, has long gone after anyone who claims that there was any form of meddling by Russia in the election. He has also long stated that there's no collusion between his campaign and Russia. It is not a surprise, though, that the White House was less than enthusiastic about the release of the Schiff memo. The president at one point saying that he would leave it to the FBI to determine whether this document should be released, something that he did not do for the Nunes memo. You'll recall that he was caught on a hot mic after the State of the Union telling lawmakers that he was 100% behind the release of the Nunes memo without ever having read a word of it. It took about 2 weeks for it to be released with some heavy redactions. And again, the White House pushing back, saying that it is not essentially the truth, and they reiterate some of the points made in the Nunes memo. Ryan.
All right, Boris Sanchez with the White House reaction. Boris, thank you for that. And Evan Perez, thank you for your reporting as well. Let's bring in our panel now to get some analysis on this issue. Joining us, Paul Callan, our CNN legal analyst, Samantha Vinograd, a CNN national security analyst, also CNN political commentators Ana Navarro and Doug Hyde. Let's first just get the initial impressions of the memo. We'll start with the team we have here in New York. Paul, are you surprised by what this memo reveals?
I'm really not surprised, because the Democrats have been talking about this for a long time, that the so-called Nunes memo was unbalanced and an unfair look at the process that led to the warrant allowing the surveillance of Carter Page. And in looking through this document, what the document does is it shows that there were a lot of things that were omitted in the Nunes memo that provided a different view to the FISA judges. And by the way, what I also find to be very, very important is that the document reveals that there were 4 separate FISA judges that approved the warrants in question, and that they were provided with really a balanced amount of information.
Right, and all 4 appointed by Republican presidents
judges
as well.
That's Republican presidents, correct.
Sam, to you now, I think the timeline seems to be one of the big points that the Democrats make in this memo. They point out that it was a full 7 weeks after the investigation started that the Steele dossier became an important part of that investigation. But the Nunes memo basically claimed that it was the foundation of the investigation, right?
I mean, it rewrote history falsely. But the other point here, I think, that we learned from this memo, which is obvious to a lot of us that are tracking this investigation, is it really lays out that the counterintelligence investigation didn't start with Carter Page. It started with Papadopoulos. And the memo also lays out the fact, which many of us know just as a fact, you can Google it and see it on the internet, Carter Page had a long-standing relationship with Russia. Carter Page's relationship did not start in July 2016 or August 2016. It goes back for a long time. So I think this memo really points to the fact that several members of the Trump campaign had long-standing relationships with Russia. Flynn had a relationship with Turkey, and that's very concerning. I can tell you I've been in touch with House Democrats and Senate Democrats. They're glad this memo is out to correct the record, but they all agree it's time to get back to work.
Right. Okay, we are going to go back to Evan Perez, who is our CNN justice correspondent. We'll get back to our panel in a second. Evan has some new information he wants to share. Evan?
Well, Ryan, I just wanted to add just a little bit to that conversation, because, again, I think part of the whole purpose of this exercise, the reason why we're even here, is that the Republicans have been making a number of claims over the past few months, not just in the Nunes memo, but before the Nunes memo. They said that the FBI illegally spied on the Trump campaign. According to this document, Carter Page was no longer associated with the Trump campaign. As a matter of fact, for the last few months, we've heard repeatedly from the White House that Carter Page was nobody. He was not involved at all. He wouldn't be able to, the president wouldn't be able to pick him out of a room, right? And so according to this document that the Democrats have released here, and according to the Nunes memo, the surveillance does not begin until October of 2016, which is well past the time that Carter Page is involved in the campaign. That's a very important thing to remember. And a second second thing, the Republicans have been making the claim, and in conservative media, you've heard that the FBI paid Christopher Steele for this dossier. That is not true. The Democrats' memo make that clear. It's information we have known for some time, but now in black and white, the Democrats are saying the FBI never paid him, and that they had cut off their relationship with him because he had spoken to the media, which was a violation of their agreement. And according to the Democratic memo, they say that the court, the Secret Surveillance Court, was informed that Steele had been cut off. So again, that's something that the Nunes memo didn't really get into, and I think it's very important for us to address here, because these are claims that have been sort of bandied about over the last year or so of this investigation to try to discredit it, and I think it's very important for people to understand that.
All right, very good. Thank you for pointing that out, Evan. Let's bring Anna and Doug back into this conversation. And I believe, Control Room, we have this soundbite ready to go. And Anna, I want to get your reaction to it. Devin Nunes just happened to be, we don't have the sound, but Devin Nunes just happened to be speaking at the CPAC conference when this memo was released. And he suggested at one point, when asked to respond to the fact that the memo had been released, we actually do have the soundbite now. So, Anna, take a listen to what Devin Nunes had to say.
We actually wanted this out, so this has been held up for over 2 weeks. The FBI and DOJ had right away told the Democrats what was wrong with their memo, or their response to our memo, and they waited for 2 weeks before they actually did the redactions that were necessary to get this out. We wanted it out. We want it out because we think it is clear evidence that the Democrats are not only trying to cover this up, but they're also colluding with parts of the government to help cover this up. And I think as you read it, you will see personal attacks on myself, personal attacks on Chairman Gowdy, with a lot of really interesting things that sound really bad, like a lot that has been happening with this Russia investigation over the course of the last year. But what you're not going to see is anything that actually rejects what was in our memo.
Anna, that is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee suggesting that Democrats are colluding with parts of the United States government to cover this up. Is that a responsible position by Devin Nunes?
It's not only not a responsible position, it's not a conservative position. It's amazing to me that this is going on at CPAC, which I think this year stands for Crazy PAC. And we've already seen that at that convention, John McCain, a national hero dealing with brain cancer, was booed. The guy who said that America is a nation of immigrants was booed. A woman, a conservative woman who went on there and said that Roy Moore and Donald Trump were sexual harassers was booed and had to be escorted out by security. And you get folks that are applauded like Devin Nunes. So I think that's, what it tells you is kind of what the base has become, what the Trump base has become. They are going to believe anything that Donald Trump or Devin Nunes says. There's not that much that is surprising in this memo. I think there's there's the legitimacy of seeing it on paper, of seeing it come out. But I think that it doesn't change many minds. The folks who want to believe Nunes do. The folks who want to believe the Democrats do. I feel this investigation is just so partisan, so politicized, so irresponsible, so off the rails. It's like the American people are being asked to be mediators in the midst of a divorce, where you've got one version and another version, and it is a stark difference with how the Senate investigation is being conducted. That one's being conducted by adults. Devin Nunes here is being, behaving like a toddler in diapers.
Well, Doug, this is an opportunity to bring you in, your experience of how the Congress works. Yeah. How difficult does this make the job of the House Intelligence Committee to come up with some sort of credible conclusion about the role that Russia played in the United States election?
Sure. Well, Ryan, let me say first and foremost, for full disclosure, I used to work for Senator Richard Burr, who's the Senate Intel chair. Have nothing but great things to say about him and the job that he does on every issue. So let me put that bias out there on the table. But I'll tell you, I spoke to somebody with the Senate Intel Committee about 2 weeks ago who said to me, and I think this is what we're all seeing today, that this investigation on the House side was blown up months ago. It was blown up on the Republican side. It was blown up on the Democratic side. We've seen for weeks and months now, every day, Adam Schiff, Eric Swalwell, Jackie Jackie Spear on television attacking Devin Nunes and his investigation. This is political. The Senate has done a much better job. I think that's where we'll see a lot more of the focus go. They're working together. Ultimately, we'll see what the end product they put out there. But clearly, Senator Burr and Senator Warner are working together and have a good relationship. All things being political, we'll again see how it ends. But that's where the focus is going to go as far as what the actual resolution is going to be on Capitol Hill.
Agreed.
All right, Doug, Anna, Sam, Paul, thank you all for your analysis in quick order on the release of this Democratic memo. And we're continuing to unpack the details from the Democratic intelligence memo that was just released. You are live in the CNN newsroom. There is much more after this.